Our next presenter is Carole-Ann Berlioz. Carole-Ann is Chief Product Officer at Sparkling Logic, another highly popular decision intelligence product. And mm, Carole-Ann, by the way, is a person who coined the very term DecisionCAMP, and she is with this movement from the very beginning and has a lot of experience in this area. And today she would talk about another problem domain, quite typical problem domain for many vendors, quite familiar area where we need to use rating engines. But she really would tell us how to build a rating engine that easy to manage. So, Carole-Ann, looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you, everyone, for attending the presentation today. It's always exciting to be able to share some of what I see in the trenches, what our customers do. For those of you that don't know me, even though I'm the Chief Product Officer, I don't like to stay locked in an office. So I spend a lot of time meeting with our customers and working with them, and I dedicate a good portion of my time actually working on projects because that's the way I can stay close to the needs of the customers. And doing that, I spent a lot of time in the past decade or more working on rating engine projects. So I thought that now has been enough projects to really talk about some best practices and some specificities of those projects that I've seen over the years. And especially, there is one project that's very dear to my heart because of just the size of that project. I think I did mention last year this 1.5 million rule project. So that's the one I will talk about mostly because when you get to that size of complexity, that size of knowledge, it's not easy to manage. No matter what you do, it's just too gigantic for one person to retain all of that information in their head, and there are too many specificities. So we had to be creative, and I think that really pushed the limit as to what the rating engine was expected to do. So with that, let me try to move to the next slide. Yes. So I'll talk very briefly about who we are and what we do because I assume that you're like me. You're more interested in the real life projects, and that's what you would rather spend the time on. And I'll talk about, again, the size of that project and why it's so big. I'll talk about how we organize that rating engine and what problem it solved from the legacy implementation, how we address that complexity, how we could go faster into implementing that volume of business rules, and how we could ensure that what we got was actually the right calculations. So back to a quick introduction. Sparkling Logic was founded in 2010, so about 14 years ago, and has been a really interesting journey. Our objective when we started the company was not to create a V2 of any kind of decision management platform that already existed, but really to rethink how to go about it and how to empower the business user. So with the design of the solution that you will see for this specific project, but throughout the technology and everything we do, our DNA is really about empowering the business analyst to be able to comprehend very vast amounts of logic or very fine-grained metrics about that logic and things like that, and try to make this information easy to consume for the business analyst to really empower them to the next level. So lots of capabilities that we can definitely live in the on the website if you're interested, and I'll talk about specifically what we do in rating. So at Sparkling Logic, we have customers, obviously, in any industry. And I say obviously because decision management is a horizontal industry, as you probably know. So no tool will be specific to one industry, and it might cater more capabilities to it, but there is no reason why the capabilities cannot be used across the board. That being said, we see, and we have seen historically, I mean, for as long as I've been in that space, which is way more, many, many decades. I'm not going to qualify that number. I feel like I have a lot of vanity today. Don't want to show my face, don't want to tell about my age. Um, but anyway, back to our customers. Um, since forever, I think we've seen a lot of, or the biggest adoption of those technologies into insurance and financial services at large. And there are lots of very good use cases for that. Rating is obviously one that is important, otherwise, I would not be talking about it today. But then going along rating is the dynamic questionnaire to be able to capture all of the information. Um, uh, so going through medical questionnaires, for example, for health or life insurance, going through the underwriting process, auto renewals, where we can adjust the pricing, going up and down based on circumstances, claims processing, etc. In financial services, especially in the world of credit, very similar activities or applications will be consumers of decision management technology, like pre-screen for credit cards, for example, the origination process, the account management with credit line increase and decrease, collections and recovery, fraud detection, etc. So there are lots of use cases, as you probably know. But I want to focus on this rating project. And I've done a lot of rating engines that were really quick to implement for life or health, more traditional insurance uh, lines of business. But then I came across this one project, and following up on the previous presentation where the real estate agent was trying to close that contract, what happens once the contract closes? Well, you're going to go to a broker for the signature, and all of those closing documents and all of those numbers that seem to be out of a hat need to be calculated somehow, and that's what this engine does. It's actually a little bit unusual for insurance. It's a specialty in itself, title insurance. And it's so gigantic because the way we close real estate is very different, not only from state to state, but from county to county and from city to city. There could be differences. So there could be differences in rates for the title products, for the closing costs, but more so for the recording taxes and fees that will be charged by the localities. This is where we will see the most differences. Typically, your closing costs are not going to change very much across the state. From state to state, they will be totally different. But within a state, typically there may be a few groups that will change. But when it comes to taxes, as you probably know, every single level of governments will want to make a difference. So there may be some county taxes that will need to add to the state taxes, and then some town taxes, and maybe some school district taxes that get layered on top of that. So that is the reason why the scope of this project is very large. And when you let the government figure out how they want to charge taxes, they can be very creative as to what will be the loopholes. And any single, yeah, and you could end up with a large number of questions that need to be asked. That if you are part of a government agency, maybe you get a discount. If you are on incorporated land, may be different. If the land is developed or not, yet again, it might be different based on the number of of names on the title. The pricing might be different once again. So lots of different um, little questions, and I think just for recording, we have I forgot like 2 or 3 thousand questions for all of the US. Obviously, we don't ask all of the questions each and every time. That would be crazy. But for a given location, it could be, a handful or a dozen questions that need to be asked in order to establish the right recording fees and taxes. And because those are all different and the way to calculate came after the fact. Even months ago, there was one location where they came up with yet another pattern for calculating the fees that we had not seen before, and we had to introduce that. So when you think that they have been in that business for um, a few decades as well. Obviously, they have had to deal with a lot of those band-aids that happened on the, uh, you know, traditionally on the server side. So they had developers left and right that will create a little stored procedure or something that is totally invisible to the rate maintenance team, so that they had to provide very extensive documentation for those unique calculations, and then they had to do extensive testing, which is extremely overwhelming when you look at the volume once again. And the delays of implementation, because it's a different team, were out of the hands of the rate maintenance team. So they will try to get them. Usually they're pretty good at being in a timely fashion, but sometimes the fee would be properly implemented months after it was introduced uh, by by the locality. So those were really the issues that we were trying to fix, or that we have been fixing with the modernization of this rating engine. Um, and our key objective was to get the rate maintenance team fully autonomous, so that they would not have to ask for IT involvement in the process. So the team, when I say the rate maintenance team, the profile for that team is really business analysts. They come from the business. Some of them have been working really on the business side and transition to that team. And what they do is to, like any business analyst team, will be to translate the business requirement into something that's more structured, more digested. But they do have access to the policy admin, or they had access to begin with, to a policy admin system where they could uh, do those configurations, set up those configurations. So uh, I did mention my 1.5 million rule number because I'm still stunned by it. But the way we got to it is really by looking at the number of products that they are managing, and maybe 1.5 today is underestimated. It might be bigger than that. I've not done a recent calculation. But we have hundreds of title products. For those title products, there are endorsements that can be layered on top of them. closing protection letters and other title fees that could be added, closing fees of different sorts, and then those that are not elective will be those recording fees and taxes. And they have a couple of dozen document types that can be submitted. So when you close your sale, you will probably have a conveyance deed. If you ask for a mortgage, there will be a mortgage document coming with it. But later on, if there is any change, if you refinance, there may be an amendment, etc. So we end up with quite a few different document types that can be submitted, recorded at any point in time. And we do that for 53 states and territories. Um, and I think I counted about 35,000 counties overall across all of those territories. So that's where all of that volume of information comes from. And there are also different transaction types. If you purchase, it's different than if you refinance, things like that, that will have an impact on the rate. So way more complicated, way more, there are way more options that can come into play than a traditional, life insurance or Medicare product that needs to be rated. Um, so there you go. So what we ended up doing, and I will be focusing mostly on the recording side because a recording is established by the government. So I'm not, by showing those numbers, I'm not disclosing anything that is proprietary to the company. Um, I asked for permission to present, to to be clear. At that point in time, they don't want to be named. It's just one of the largest title insurance company in the country, and they are comfortable with me saying that. Um, but they don't want to be named specifically, and they are comfortable with talking about the rating aspect. So what we did was to use, of course, a decision management platform. We use Smarts to implement the solution. And the value they found in using a decision management platform rather than a policy admin was obviously the flexibility. We could specifically uh, organize our calculation any way we wanted. We were not forced into a structure. So we could say, go and figure out what are the fees, figure out which one are applicable and which one are not, then calculate your recording fees, and then round your recording fees, um, and then finalize them if there is maximum, minimum, or some other things that need to apply. But then if we realize we needed to run something ahead of time, then we could insert a new activity ahead and do a rounding of some input values before getting to the calculation or before the filtering of those rules. This is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction. I don't think the complete decision flow could print on paper, on any size of paper. It's it's quite large, and again, because we have the recording, the title, the closing, all of it that comes into play, um, and the different layers of options that I would not even have dreamt about coming into this project. I learned a lot. I have a lot more respect for the brokers when closing on a real estate transaction. But we could draw that process graphically together and reorganize the steps, and realize later on this one needs to be before, this one needs to be after, or we need to have the option because one state will do it before and another state will do it after. And then we could drill down to the business rules. So I'm not going to go into exactly how we calculate everything because that's just calculation. So we just have, some fees that will be a percentage of the amount of the property you're buying. there will be some rates that will be so much for the first page of the document, and then an incremental cost for any additional page. There will be some additional fees that get layered on top of it. I think Georgia is one state where, don't quote me, I think it's Georgia, where they will charge you interest, actually, and penalties and interest on top of that if you've answered that you did not file within this time frame, etc. So there are lots of layers that will come into play. But for the team, what really gave them um, confidence that everything was calculated properly, even though the calculations are complicated. Out of the existing system, there was a way to obtain the trace to understand how things got calculated. And those traces were multi-pages for a single title product, typically. Not necessarily all the time, but typically would be multiple pages just to justify how they got to the number. So within the tool, by being able to look at a specific transaction, this one is a recording fee in Chicago. We can see that for these documents, my standard page fee was $101, and there is no additional page fee. So that was it. But then there was a credit of $9 if the person says that, or if they answer that the party is a government agency. So 101 minus the $9 is $92. You can just look at the different lines, make sense and justify this one I agree with, this one I don't, and refine. And that gives you that confidence that it's not a black box where I have no idea where the number is coming from. I can follow the calculations, and I can understand uh, how things, how the final number, the bottom line number, got calculated. So let me, no, that's good. Sorry. To address the complexity of the rules, the rules themselves were not very difficult. Saying that you start with your 101 rate and then you subtract $9 because it's a credit agency is a rule that I think any of us could write without even thinking. The problem is maintaining that volume of rules when it's, one county might be $9, another county might be a different amount. One might apply it, one might not apply it, and so on. And that's just for one tax, as you can see for Chicago. So there are three different recording offices in Chicago, but for each one of them, there are three different taxes, and there is a recording fee for each one of the documents that we're managing. So all of that volume is what is complicated and difficult to wrap your head around, to say, if I introduce one new tax or if I modify a tax, how do I know that it gets rounded the right way to begin with, that it gets filtered the right way, that it's only applicable if, and what are all those additional fees, or which one is the fee schedule, because there might be one for low, uh, um, if the consideration amount is low, and another one for over $1 million property, like in New York, for example. If you get $1 million property, you'll get the mansion fee that will layer on top. But otherwise, you will be subject to a different schedule, and you will not have to pay this uh, mention fee on top. So being able to, put all of your little pieces of calculations together so that you have the correct configuration is something we had to be creative about. We had to figure out what is one view of all of those individual rules that will make sense. So we created a navigation, like you can see on the screen, where they can say, I'm interested in the state of Illinois. So I'm interested in recording. In recording, I'm interested in the state of Illinois. In the state of Illinois, I'm interested in Chicago. Then you will select one of those three Chicago recording offices, and then select the tax or the fee for the document that you're interested in. And it will take you to the page that represents the configuration end-to-end of that one. This one is a recording fee. So even though it looks like a lot of information goes in one page to configure what it's going to be, it actually ends up being a ton of rules that are dispatched at any point in time into this calculation process. So special instructions will come at the very end when we create the fee summary or the quote, if you will, and we return it. Who the fee is payable to, whether it's the label that is specified at the office level, or whether you want to override it for this specific fee, and the address also is something that can be done in this page, but it's only relevant when we create the fee summary again. Who pays it is something that happens in this finalized step of the calculation. The minimum charge, maximum charge, max cumulative charge, all of that also is at the end of the calculation. And then what you see at the bottom, the fee schedule, and then what you don't see with the additional fees and so on, will be what is the heart of the calculation, which are in the documentation that's provided by each one of those states and counties to specify the rates that need to be calculated. So by having everything at once in one page, where they can just configure their rate, they can have this end-to-end vision of what is the setup for this one rate, even though we will take advantage of all of those different pieces. Um, we will leverage them at different points in time in the calculation of the rate. But that makes it easy for the rate maintenance to understand and to just take a glance and say, oh, this one is $202. If they answered no to question 415, but it will be 114 for the others. Um, uh, the configuration has a lot of checkboxes because of all of those different unique options that our government is has created. But the nice thing is that everything can be done without writing syntax and having to write rules and test rules and to fish the needle in the haystack. I don't know if I can mix the metaphors, but fishing for that one rule that is in a million and a half sets of rules is something that has been not only much easier for the team to put together, but much easier when they need to validate and it gives them a lot of confidence that that configuration is the right one. Staring at the rules can look at the rule and say it looks right, but it's hard to get that other context in your head when a- when when you just look at just one rule at a time. Um, 1.5 million rules is obviously a large number. If I have not made that point yet, it's enormous, and I didn't want to write 1.5. As much as I love writing rules, I didn't want to write 1.5 million rules. I didn't want to have an army of people just on their keyboard and putting things together. So we will look for opportunities to optimize, to automate the import as much as possible. So out of the legacy system, we were lucky enough we could get tables produced that we could use business rules to translate into the new business rules format. So most of the process is really a push button, and it allowed us to say for the state of Illinois, click on the button, and then you will uh, go and find all of the recording offices, create them with all the opening hours, addresses, all of that information, plus all the fees and taxes that are being charged, if you will, by this recording office. Um, the process was 100% for some of the modules, but not always. And recording was probably the one that was the least automatable because of all of those band-aids. There was no way we could take the stored procedures and translate them into business rules. And not because um, it's impossible to do it, but the garbage that was in those stored procedures and the very strange way they implemented them. Sorry, I shouldn't say garbage. I don't want them to feel offended. But um, there was sometimes there was structure and logic to it, and sometimes there wasn't. And even the team could not reverse engineer what that stored procedure did. So we had to go back to the state or the county or the city to extract the actual requirement from the source instead of going to that pile of whatever. Um, the biggest benefit, or one big well, the biggest benefit was that as a result, we got maybe 90% of our recording fees and taxes automated. The the other benefits we had with using the automation was to find some not discrepancies, but some anomalies into the logic that was implemented. So we could find that, for example, where we had, and it was, sorry, it was more on the title side than the recording side, but we could get some rate tables where they would say from that amount to that amount, this is what you pay, this is your rate. From this amount to that amount, this is your rate. And the rate was going up, 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 and then down. So we could identify those anomalies. And then the team looked at them and say, this one is actually intended, but that one is a typo. So they could refile the rates and get them corrected into the system. So that was a good thing. For the for the recording side, there were some issues that they knew were in the system that were calculated incorrectly, but that was on the backlog. Back to not having control as to what IT does. We found a lot of those issues where um, uh, they had on their desk that they needed to fix this specific setup. Um, like, for example, well, no, I'm not going to point to that problem, but there was, for example, some minimum maximums that were not applied. So those kind of things. Um, they knew it was incorrect. They knew that sometimes they were not asking a question they were supposed to ask, but it had not been fixed yet, and it's still not fixed for whatever reason that's outside of our control. So we could identify those things and know of those known discrepancies where we have the right rates, but the existing system doesn't. The My biggest satisfaction in this project has been the regression testing capability. Um, because with 1.5 million rules, you know that if you have a few hundred test cases, you're not going to exercise all of it. There is no way that you'll be able to find everything. So we've been able to work with their IT guys so that they could generate test cases for us and allowing us to know what are the expected outcomes compared to the legacy system. And we could automate the testing of those test cases. To this date, we have 8 million test cases that we have processed. A very small portion of them was produced by the team. I would say, uh, I don't know, maybe 1,000, which is still a nice number, but nowhere as exhaustive as it needs to be. But they knew exactly what were the test cases that they wanted uh, to to test specifically. So they created those. Um, we generated and processed through the legacy system the vast majority of those numbers. And then monthly, we get a dump of production transactions so that we could compare. Here you can see a few of the reports to show you did we pass or fail on recording at large and more specifically for the fees and for the taxes. We have 150 reports like that. Some that will say, are my opening hours correct between the legacy office and the new office? Um, are my special instructions matching? So everything we can test between the two, we have created a report for. Most of them are charts where we can see where the numbers fall. And some of them would be more tables so that I can extract, you know, the difference between those rates and things like that. So with those 150 reports, they are able to really get a good handle on what's going on, what is currently tested, what is not complete yet, and they can navigate very quickly. So out of these 20,000 transaction sample, uh, uh, 1,614 of them did not include recording as part of the transaction. And most of them passed. Those that did actually passed, but I had 16 of them that failed on the snapshot. And the recording taxes are good for all of them. The 16 problems are all in on the recording fee side. So without even looking at the rules, without looking at the test cases, I know where I need to focus on. And if I scroll down and look at the reports, it will show me they are all in the Cook County, for example, in Cook County, or in they are all for conveyance deeds, or they are all for, well, they don't have to be all systematically, but they will give me the reports will give me that information so that I already know what I'm looking for even before I step into the analysis of a single test case. So that has been invaluable. Um, to me, the good story is that some of them, especially from the production system, a lot of those problems we found were actually problems we had to fix into their legacy system. So we're still in shadow mode, and so we keep maintaining the existing system. And that happens quite a lot. So they get two QA for the price of one. We QA our system, but we QA their legacy system at the same time. What else could we say? I think that's a good presentation. I'll keep it for questions. So the key takeaway and my personal experience is that For some quote system, um, insurance companies has been um, feeling comfortable going to a decision management platform for rating, but very quickly, I mean, the first reaction typically is, oh, rating is too complicated, and no, we'll use rules for underwriting, but not for rating. And then after, talking to them, getting them more comfortable, they're willing to do it. But I think this specific use case is one where I can say it made a huge difference, and it does make a huge difference in their day-to-day life to have that level of control without compromising with having to deal with the low level. They can have a higher level interface, but they still have the control if they need to tweak how things get calculated. Um, So a lot of the time we spend is figuring out what additional buttons, we call them magic buttons, we can add to this uh, smart center or maintenance interface so that we can automate more of their tasks. So when the rates change, they typically change for multiple offices at one time. Instead of going one by one, they can just apply those changes across the board. And Pennsylvania is infamous for not voting their changes on time. So twice a year, they would change their recording fees or recording taxes, which is a nightmare. Pennsylvania is a nightmare because they have so many recording offices. Um, I think they have like 3,000 recording offices. So everything you do in Pennsylvania just bubbles up as a gigantic thing. Um, and uh, the last point is, I think, my biggest satisfaction with this project was how fast we could get those rules in, or the rules created using this automated migration, and how the testing today is making it so easy because nobody wants to go screen by screen across hundreds or thousands of recording offices per state and make sure document by document that can it be recorded? If it can be recorded, what is the amount? If it cannot be recorded, what is the message we want to display? All of that is very time consuming. So being able to leverage automated testing, obviously only possible when you have a legacy system, but that's often the case that it's available. So that has been a source of efficiencies and a source of satisfaction for me when I process a new 500,000 test cases and everything passes. And if not, I know where to look, and um, it takes hours rather than weeks or months to figure out what the problems are and how to fix them. So with that, I want to open the floor to questions, if any. And want to thank you for attending the presentation.
Thank you, Carole-Ann. You have a question in chat. You can read it loud. Loud.
Uh, okay, let me find the chat.
Just
Is the functionality to generate the large volume test cases now part of the product, or was it a one-off? Um, so the ability to generate test cases is in the product, but the way we generate them or what we want to generate is always specific. It's not because we have an amount that we will always create this and that amount. So here we could say we want 0, 500. I mean, there were odd numbers just because we used a lot of rounding, so we had to use numbers that were not rounded. But what was outside of the product in this case was the ability to generate those test cases and run them through the legacy system. And
So,
then everything else
thinking,
is, yes, go ahead.
hi, Carole-Ann, thank you very much for that presentation. Very, very interesting. The reason for my question was I was trying to clarify whether the creation of the very large volume test sets was something that the product already supports, or it was done externally. It sounds like the latter. If
It's both. We can do
okay,
both. So we can
so I know
create, and
you can generate individual test cases, but is there a way of generating mass test cases inside the product already?
yes, we can generate very large volumes. We actually have a Smarts Academy video on how to do that. Smarts Academy is just our internal, not internal, but uh, the self learning videos you can watch out of our documentation. So all of that has been something we've advocated for a long time that is in the product that allows you to generate all those test cases, and we can generate whatever permutations you want using those capabilities. But it only creates the test cases. Obviously, it cannot invent what would be the calculation, the expected outcome. So in this case, we did the generation externally just because it was easier to generate the old XML, get it processed through the legacy system, and then translate it.
Okay. More questions?
Okay, thank you.
And
Okay,
it's
if you
kind of
don't,
cool because this translation layer that we collaborated on just puts everything into S3 buckets, so nothing gets polluted into our repository. We can just connect to it, run a simulation, get the reports, and get the check mark.
okay. Thank you, Carole-Ann, for a very interesting presentation as usual. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.